Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Um, Sorry, some noises in my background. My name is Luna. I'm the program manager for Echo's Design Leadership Program. I'm here today with Erica, Denise, and Mike. Mike is one of our North American ambassadors for the Design Leadership Program. It's such an honor to be here again. I'm sure there's going to be just one more insightful conversation. We had an amazing conversation last week about design and education. It was quite insightful, and I'm pretty sure, considering our guest tonight, it's going to be just another one of those. I would like to start by sharing with you our video about the Echo's Design Leadership Program. So just bear with me for a second.
Design is leadership.
In recent years, we've begun to see that the most successful organizations are the ones that infuse their business with design at the core.
In our 12-week program, you will hear from and interact with some of the world's most highly regarded design and innovation leaders from across the globe. Our exclusive masterclass sessions will give you insights into how design leaders think and act in order to elevate design in their own organizations to deliver exceptional outcomes.
You will participate in more hands-on workshops with design leaders from your region, in which you will deep dive into some of the theory and practical activities behind the masterclass topics.
The Design Leadership Program is for those who want to learn how to manage and grow their team, develop their design vision, act as an advocate and catalyst for design within their organization, and generally navigate the challenging yet rewarding world of design leadership. We know that the realm of design is constantly evolving.
Our biggest goal is to help you develop the skills needed to become a great design leader who can continue to navigate the ever-changing world of business and society over the next decade.
We hope to see you in Season 2 of the Design Leadership Program.
Very good. Well, just give me 1 minute so I can organize a couple of things on my end, and I start sharing the slide deck that will be guiding our conversation today. Meanwhile, I would invite everyone to let us know where you are joining from. Usually our sessions have people from all over the world, but please, I know Patricia is in Chicago, I'm in San Diego, Rafael, my colleague, he's joining us from Sydney, Australia. I know Mark is in Florida. So it's good to also know that we have multiple perspectives here on this subject, especially because, well, we all deal with different ways that our own background or our own environment deals with environmental issues and sustainability. So I think it's quite important for us to understand the perspective that everybody's coming from. I would like to introduce a little bit about Echoes. We are an independent global innovation lab driven by design. We have three business models. The one hosting us today is the School of Design Thinking. We help business create value and innovation for good. And we help people in organization master the innovation mindset, skills, and tools. We're a global team. I'm in the US, but we have a big team in Brazil, a big team in Australia, and a big team growing in Europe as well, in Portugal and in Italy. Over the past 11 years, we've graduated over 70,000 people online and over 40,000 people present when we had our labs in Rio and in Sao Paulo, Brazil, as well as Sydney. We are part of the Global Design Thinking Alliance. We are the only innovation independent lab conducting research among these big names that you see on your screen. It's such an honor to be part of this. And what about the Design Leadership Season 2? It's coming up in 10 days. We're literally on the last stretch of Firesessions and registering people to start the journey in a couple of days. It's a 12-week journey. You'll be able to find this mind map, this journey map on our website and our syllabus. Basically, this idea comes from these 4 pillars, which is how we see design thinking, or design leadership, which is a lot about you and yourself. You can only give what you have. So you need to understand what is your tone of voice, who you are, how does your leadership is exposed to the world and the people that you're dealing with and leading. It is a lot about you and other people, because if you're a leader, you necessarily are impacting someone's life. So you need to understand what is intention, what is the mindset you have behind that. And you and your team are necessarily designing something together. So it's a lot about the products and services that you are delivering, making sure to understand how to create high value products that make sense to our society. I'm pretty sure you guys are going to be talking a lot about that today. And necessarily whatever it is that we create impacts on the systems that we are, that we belong. So it's a lot about you and systems as well. So we need to develop the holistic perspective of design. This is a little bit of our lineup for season 2. Every new season, we try to change the lineup as much as possible so we can have multiple perspectives on design leadership from the whole spectrum of design. We start May 9th all the way until August 3rd. We have a little bit of summer break in between. I won't go into the structure of the course right now. You have me or Rafael to help you in any questions that you have regarding the program. And by the end of the session today, I'll share my email address. So if you want to schedule a one-on-one with me, I'll be more than happy. But with no further, I'll leave the stage for the 3 of you. Mike, thank you so much for helping us make this possible today. And I'll be just here listening to what you guys have to say. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. To get started with the conversation, I'll just give you a quick little background about me. My name is Mike Pedersen, and like Luna said, I am an ambassador for the Ecos Design leadership program. And then I also work in a consultancy to do a little bit of design work as well as product design and for 2 design podcasts. So a little about me. I want to hear about our panelists a little bit. So today we have also Dr. Erica Woodley, a chief scientist and CEO at the Hydras. And then we also have Denise DeLuca, let me get that right, the founder of Wild Hazel. So if you ladies would love to, I would love to hear a little bit more about your background, who you are, and what you guys do. So first, let's start with Denise.
Well, thanks. And thanks for hosting this. I went to a couple of these already just to get a sense of it. And it's really wonderful conversations. Yeah, so my background is in civil engineering. I have a master's in civil engineering and spent years doing consulting and working for government and nonprofits and private sector, and mostly around sustainability. And I kept getting frustrated that people were working on the wrong problems, and eventually I just got more and more involved with designers, and I just thought, this is what we need to do. We need design to solve the sustainability problem. So I've learned more and more about design. I worked for the Biomimicry Institute for a while, and I've really been forwarding biomimicry in all different aspects, formed a couple of groups around that, and worked for the Living Future Institute for a while, and they do the Living Building Challenge. And then most recently, I just left the position of director of the Master of Arts in Sustainable Design at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. And I left so I could pursue this venture that I'm calling Wild Hazel, to pick up on this work I did years ago and put aside to work full time. And now I'm going back to that.
Wonderful. Thank you for the intro. Dr. Erica?
Yes. Well, first off, I'm really excited to learn more about Denise's background and her journey, especially starting as a civil engineer, because I come into design from a scientific world. I am trained as a biologist. I did my PhD on marine biology in Australia, where I lived for 7 years. So it's cool to hear we have a lot of Australian representation here. And like Denise, I noticed a lot of problems in the space I was in particular, the translation of scientific discovery into public understanding and action. which led me to found a nonprofit called the Hydrus, which is based here in San Francisco, where I'm from. And some of the tools we use include emerging technology like virtual reality and photogrammetry. And especially as we designed our educational programs, I got really interested in using design, human-centered design, to solve problems in the ocean. So I had the great opportunity to work at the D School at Stanford as a fellow with the D School and the Center for Ocean Solutions, and even worked with Mike's organization, People Rocket, to help people think about approaching problems from a human-centered lens. And I love introducing human elements into what are traditionally quantitative kind of fields, where we learn how combining those things lead to really impactful and sustainable solutions, especially for environmental problems.
Yeah, it's funny that you both mentioned a lot of similar things. One regarding humanity and how we look at it, and the second one regarding some of the problems and with communicating those issues when it revolves around nature. So I'm curious, like as we're at the beginning of this intersection of the conversation, like what is something that you wish you knew, maybe when first encountering those problems or first trying to translate some of the information when it comes to your environmental design journey? Let's go there.
I can go ahead unless Denise has a thought. I think the most pressing thing, or the most obvious thing for me, is when I started, I wanted to design things for everyone. I wanted, accessibility, and I wanted access, I wanted impact, and I wanted broad reach. But something I learned working in human-centered design is that if you try to design for everyone, you end up designing for no one. So you have to, break the problem up into manageable pieces. So you can't let perfect be the enemy of good. Just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you can't do one thing very well and effectively.
I love that answer, Erica. And I think one of the things that I learned, because like I said, coming from an engineering background, all of my family are scientists, and I'm like, it's always about facts, it's always about science, there's always a correct answer. And it took me a really long time to learn the importance of imagination, that as an engineer, you use convergent thinking, you solve problems. But one thing that frustrated me was like, I'm solving the wrong problem, and everyone around me is solving the wrong problem. And what we need to do is imagine this beautiful world and then design it with this world where the problems don't exist. And again, that's what designers can do. They are like professional imaginationers, Imagineers or whatever. And so that is super important. And also, I think tapping into, Erica, what you were saying, how important being human is, and the humanities. Again, coming from engineering and science, it's like, oh, that's just fluffy stuff. And it's like, oh my God, that's all that matters. It's like, if we're not humans and we don't design for humans and humans in nature, all the other stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, as from a human perspective, and this may be a little off topic, like where do you feel that people miss the mark, right, in trying to understand this intersection? Like if you're just going to communicate it to the average person that you might meet at the grocery store about maybe what are some of the problems, what do you think they might be missing on a regular basis as far as trying to connect the two?
It's very kind of you to say just people in general, because I can just speak on what I've done wrong in terms of just telling people facts or telling people what to do. I know in my early, in my 20s, when I was doing my PhD, I was very much, I had a little bit of an arrogance about me because I was frustrated with, again, this this poor translation of science into public understanding. So I took opportunities to go out and talk to people and share things, but I realized facts aren't fun and facts aren't effective. It's the human connection, and it's the two-way conversations and mutual respect and understanding that lead to real change, and also a real understanding of who your audience is. So, things I've done wrong in the past that I've definitely learned from is thinking that facts speak for themselves, but they absolutely do not. What you need to offer is, an experience and thoughtful design.
I'd build right on that. That again, one of the reasons I got so attracted to design is that in addition to imagination, designers have skills in empathy, not just the feeling of but actually like thinking, feeling, hearing, saying, doing, like mapping it out, understanding where people are coming from, that what they're hearing is not the same as what they're thinking and saying, so just because you put it in front of them, Erica, doesn't mean that's what they're going to hear. It's so twisted by what they feel and what they know and where they are in the world. And so using, really actively using empathy is super helpful. And I agree, I'm all about facts, but it's that you can actually go backwards with that because people just get overwhelmed. Yeah. I mean, who knows the difference between a billion and a trillion,
Right. And you can combine evidence and empathy in really thoughtful ways. You can have both.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought
Yeah.
up empathy, because that to me is the most exciting part of design, and the huge takeaway for applying it to every aspect of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think you guys have really just kind of like hit on our second, kind of question that we were going to ask, which was like, what is your biggest insight? And so it definitely sounds like there's a component of some empathy and some humanity, and that's really like infused into the way that we want to do design. So I'm going to kind of supercharge it since we kind of like touched on it a little bit already. So I'm curious as to like what you feel like the impact of having that empathy, like almost in a perfect world, if we were able to communicate to everybody, what impact would that have on you, the people that you work with, the perceptions of the work, and the implications of the work in general?
Yeah, I think, one thing is that when we talk about like design and the environment, one thing is that the environment and humans are completely intertwined. So environmental justice and social justice are one and the same. And so realizing, where people are in the world, and then relating to what they understand to be true. So you have to really go to where they are and what they understand about the environment. And I guess another thing is that it's one of those things but you don't really know till you think about it. And that is that like everything, that all the issues that we're dealing with the environment and social justice are caused by things that we make, how we make them, why we buy them, how we use them, how we dispose of them. All of those things are designed. So our world is unsustainable by design. It is totally intentional. Now, this is not to blame designers, but to highlight like how critical designers are in our drive to sustainability, and they're disempowered. They're stuck in this little spot in the system, and they don't have the ability right now to design for sustainability. So that's another big insight for me.
And I completely agree that nothing happens in a vacuum, right? You can't disentangle humans from the environment because we're part of it and we rely on healthy ecosystems. And so when we think about environments, they can be natural environments or built environments. And the phrase environment can be quite broad, and we can turn that into multiple categories on its own. So for instance, I might think about how I design for climate change education, right? Or how I might design for ocean policy, or how I might design for urban development, right? And a top of mind example is here in San Francisco. The city has just redesigned the entryway into the city from the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's one of the most iconic scenes in any city. And what used to be there, Doyle Drive, was one of the most dangerous roads in the world. It was like a 2 out of 100 safety rating, and plus it was, other parts of it came down from earthquakes. And there were all these special interests because it was a military area there, and it's become a national park. And so but what they've done is taken a long time. It's taken decades. There was such an incredible display of collaboration from many different stakeholders, from community organizations, as well as the transportation department, as well as the national park system, to really offer a beautiful solution where now instead of a highway, it's a parkway that even has natural tunnels that connect the national park to the waterfront, that have passageways for people and wildlife. And so looking at things like that, it's really inspiring to see what people can do. Of course, we don't all have decades to solve a problem or billions of dollars like they did, but there was so much functional friction, so much productive disagreement. So you can have empathy in terms of understanding the needs of everybody, but you don't have to align or agree. And you can find solutions that don't sacrifice the quality or imagination of the idea.
And I also might add that we, and you mentioned this, Erica, that humans are part of nature, and we just forget that all the time. People, even if you're in a completely enclosed concrete building, you can't even see outside, you're still part of nature. Every breath you take, you're breathing in molecules that every other living thing have exhaled and just keep circulating. So we are part of nature, and our DNA is nature. So we have this, this wisdom inside of us that knows nature, that we want that. And if designers using empathy can tap into that. I know people doing like biophilic design are trying to tap into that, but I think we can go way farther, is understand the nature part of human nature.
And I'd love to hear more about your work in biomimicry and not only demonstrating how a part of nature we are, but how much we can learn from nature to solve problems.
Yeah, and actually, I worked in biomimicry for a long time, and as a designer and educator. And one of the things that occurred to me is it's not, you have to take the whole biomimicry as a whole. You can't just take part of it. I can design something cool that emulates nature, because you can't consume your way to sustainability. So you can't just keep designing more stuff. And it's more sustainable stuff, or it's biomimetic. It has to be at that much deeper level. And I think the more I call it realigning with nature, the more you can do that personally, the less stuff that you want. And the more you understand yourself, the more designers can do that, then they can be designing from a different place, which is what we need.
I like that you incorporate the life cycle of what you design even after you put it into the world. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and that's making me think of a lot of different things when it comes to sustainability, right? So it's not like you talked about, not just creating more stuff or reusable things. It's changing the way that humans behave and interact with our environment as a whole, kind of changes things. So I'm curious, as we go to our next kind of question, what are some of the other strategies that we can use to evolve impactful design, right, in a larger entity? So we're talking specifically around the environment right now, but I'm also thinking of how does this relate to business or government or things of that nature? How do we expand and be able to attack such a large issue or intersection, while still not designing for nothing, like you talked about?
I think a lot of it comes from partnerships and conversation and community building in terms of, it takes many to solve problems. It takes many points of view. You also can't transplant one solution in one region or one ecosystem to another one. It really does require deeply understanding the problems, the specific problems in whatever region or ecosystem or community you're targeting, and talk to as many people as you can, and ensure that there's a design process that is inclusive and thoughtful, based on what you're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, it's funny that this is a question because we are impactfully designing for an entity as large as the environment. Everything you design it impacts everywhere. I mean, you take like something like this and the ripple effects, the petroleum that went into the plastic, that in the coloring and the sticker, and this is supposed to be cool because it's reusable and refillable, but we do design impactfully for the environment. So I guess one of the things is to, at least in the Master of Art and Sustainable Design program at MCAD, one of the foundational courses is systems thinking. You have to understand the system. And like Buckminster Fuller would say, and if you're too young to know Buckminster Fuller, look him up, that, if you're doing systems thinking, you need to start with the biggest system that makes sense, because that means the universe. Start there and then work down to where you actually can have some influence, but don't kid yourself that you're not having, that influence, because this is causing, plastic particles in babies halfway around the world. And so we just have to recognize that. So I think systems thinking, and I know, Luna, you mentioned that at the beginning, is absolutely critical. And then with that, allowing designers to get out of this box and to be able to see the system. I mean, designers have this, like I said, imagination and creativity, see the system and go, oh, well, if we intervened here, we wouldn't have to do this over here. And so to do that, and I think you address this in your program, we need more designers in leadership roles, not leaders telling designers what to do, but quite the reverse. We need the designers and the people with design thinking skills in leadership roles, because leaders tend to think wider. They have the perch where they can see the system, and the designers told what to do. Like, here's a brief, you make it happen. They don't have that many choices, but if they had the ability to influence a much bigger system, that would be a positive impact.
I love what you said about designers being in leadership roles. And to add to that, thinking about how we can make everyone designers. and even if you're trained as an engineer or a scientist, or you're a fisher, or you're a community organizer, you're a designer, right? It's really a matter of adopting different mindsets and skills and abilities when you're approaching problems. And I think having, that mindset that we're all designing and we're all co-designing when we're solving these big problems. And one other thing I'd like to add to, thinking about breaking down such big problems into manageable solutions. Right now, we're in the midst of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science, which is something I've been involved in as part of working groups. And I'm also my organization is one of about 30 program partners in the world to this decade. And it's so well organized in that everybody has a very clear role around the world in what we're trying to do. And these United Nations reports, I mean, the ocean is a really big place, so there are a lot of big problems and a lot of people involved and a lot of stakeholders. And so, going through all of these reports, even if I just find one paragraph that resonates with me and overlaps with what I want to work on, and what skill set I have to do, that's where I get started, right? And it reminds me, I love that image that Luna shared at the beginning about the sort of the leadership schematic, because it reminded me of, whether it's the Japanese concept of ikigai or that famous sketch by Charles Eames, where you want to find that intersection of what the world needs, what your skills and, passion come from, and also, what you can live off of, or what you can really keep sustainable. And so I love these sorts of concepts, and I love these visual images of imagining where those intersections lie and where you are on that journey.
And I thanks for all that, Erica. I just love hearing your insights. Another thing is, I said we got to have the whole universe and all that, which is true. However, it totally makes sense, as you said, to start small. And one, I probably have the diagram in front of me somewhere, but I'm a big believer in spiral processes. And you start in the littlest spiral in the inside and give it a go, see what you learn, gain some insights, see what works. People talk about fail fast, fail forward, but it's like, they tend to take big steps and fail and go, no, but take little ones, little tiny ones, and then keep gaining those insights, keep gaining skills. And then you can pivot quickly and take on new things, take on bigger things. But, don't be afraid to start with whatever you can, what you do have within your grasp and in your community.
Yeah, I'm picking up a lot of great stuff from you guys, because it feels like you just almost have to like start small, find out what resonates to you, right? And then capture your inner designer and use what you know in your toolkit to kind of bring in people around you, and take small little risks and figure out what you like and what you don't like and kind of move the needle forward. Is that a accurate summation?
Absolutely. And I'd also just love to shout out to Patricia for a great comment in the chat, in that we're all born designers. And it's just a matter of losing that ability, usually through different systems of education where you're taught to just choose what's right and what's wrong, and find the answer because there's only one answer, when in fact very few things, unless you're doing a simple mathematical problem. Many problems in the world in situ have multiple solutions, and it can be really hard when so much of our society encourages discomfort and ambiguity. Everybody wants certainty. And so when you have that freedom to explore, again, back to Patricia's comment, when you're a child, everything is just free and open, and you can explore and play, and encouraging that in adult designers and people who have important skill sets in environmental protection, for instance, is really, really valuable. And I think it's really a matter of creating these collaborative, imaginative mindsets, and making sure that they're supported in as many contexts as possible.
Mm-hmm. I'd kind of jump on that. Like the yes and to that is everyone's a designer inherently. Everyone's also a systems thinker. We go, oh, systems thinking, what's that? But if I said, oh, I need to go to Paris next week, how should I get there? The response would be, well, it depends. And yep, it depends. It depends on this and that, and it depends on the system. It depends on all these different systems. And that's another question a designer would ask, and tell me more. I need to understand more. So we're inherently designers, we're inherently systems thinkers. And then what people can do is like put some tools to that, knowing that you already have that inside you.
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to like unlearning some processes that I guess when we lose our imagineering ways as a child, we seem to get a little bit more formalized. And so getting back to those roots, and it seems like we're, as designers, almost not developed a solution, but developed a strategy to get there. Like you talked about, like, how are you going to Paris? Like, okay, it might be train, bus, boat, whatever. Like, it's about the strategy and how we're going about it. And so that kind of leads into our next question. So I'm thinking, like, what are the strategies that we could use to evolve this intersection of design for sustainability and for the environment? Like, what are the tools that we need, like, for example, outside of maybe just, well, of course, the mindset, but what are things that we might be missing that could be really helpful to help, grow this concept?
There's so many, answers to that question, but I feel like every designer and every business person, every engineer, every teacher needs to understand sustainability. I am shocked every day at how little educated people, including sustainability professionals, understand about sustainability. There's a lot of misinformation out there, not like that, negative kind of misinformation, but people end up chasing, focusing on the wrong things, or they do one thing and they think, oh, I'm done, I'm sustainable now. And like, oh no, it doesn't work that way. So I think this having, really accessible information for designers so they understand their impact in the system, in the world. And then, I know I come from a biomimicry background, but if designers spent more time in nature and with good prompts, like, how do I look at nature? People look at it, try to name things. I take people out. I'm like, I don't want anyone to name anything. I don't want to hear a single Latin name. I don't care, and I'll take engineers out and I'll say, okay, stand in front of this plant and reverse engineer it. And they're like, what? Like, well, what's the hydraulic system? What's the energy system? What's the water, what's the structural system? And it's so funny because the answer to that question is the same. Like, oh, the veins are the structural system. The veins are the water transport system. The veins are the energy transport system. Like, oh, that's what smart design is supposed to be. And so when they see it in nature, which is what we have to ultimately design for, we have to design to be aligned with nature. So that's where, the tools of biomimicry can come in. But, just having more time in nature so people can discover for themselves, how to look at it differently.
I love what you said about just all the misinformation about what green living or sustainability is, and the sort of attitudes that can come with it. I think that's a really interesting problem. And I completely agree. So much of a lot of issues, at least for day-to-day decisions, the problem is an information problem in terms of the amount of information out there. Because again, with the age of information we're living in, it's not necessarily about finding the right answer. It's about discarding waves upon waves of bad information. And so I think a big part of the solution is finding ways to develop that literacy and that understanding of ecological literacy, scientific literacy, and understanding how the economic, ecological, and social can balance. And again, nothing exists in a vacuum. A piece of clothing is not sustainable like it's often marketed. It's a much bigger story, especially when you think about life cycles or unintended implications. And I think that when I imagine the ways that this field will evolve and continue, I look at the more recent events or design solutions that give me a lot of inspiration and hope. And quite often it's about engaging new technologies, as well as being very connected to sort of cultural shifts and really working with these groundswell changes, rather than trying to have sort of a top-down solution that a particular part of the world isn't ready for. And so my hope is that the humility of design and the empathy of design will continue to be strong and extend into scientific and conservation realms.
Yeah, and I think that idea of empathy, another thing I kind of learned along the way from designers is you have to have empathy for yourself. So, if you're designing stuff and that stuff is harming the world, like, okay, right now that's where we are. And how can we be better? How can I be better? What can I do with my skills? What else could I be doing with my skills and earn a living and have that positive impact? But I think, we can't live sustainably right now in our context. And, the pillars of capitalism do not include nature or humanity, except to exploit the two. Flat out, and our jobs come from capitalism one way or another. So that's the construct. And I guess, again, when we're coming back to like being in nature, understanding yourself, what is enough for you, all that is really important. So how can we imagine this world that is sustainable and the role you can play to get there, but don't beat yourself up along, while we're trying to get there.
Yeah, I think it'd be a little counterproductive to beat ourselves up when we're trying to experiment and go along. I do have one last question to Erica, and you were talking about the groundswell and cultural shifts. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that, because I know I'm personally curious, and I wonder if that might incite some others as to find their curiosity about what this intersection might look like, to see what other people are doing.
Sure. Let me try to think of an example, because in the world of ocean conservation, there's, in my experience, even in just like the 20 years I've been studying the ocean, there have been so many changes in attitudes and policy, especially around overfishing, marine pollution, especially plastic pollution, as well as climate change. And so those attitudes for those topics and the general public understanding and consensus has really, I think, improved over the last 20 years, and a lot more so over the last 50 years. But I wasn't around for those. And it's, the movement to ban plastic bags, say, in different cities have different legislation. It wouldn't have been successful if there wasn't already a general support from the public in reducing that kind of unnecessary waste. And my hope is that continues to extend into other marine pollution issues like agricultural runoff, which has a lot less public attention than plastic pollution. And then with things like climate change, I think for so long, for a lot of people, and I'm kind of speaking from a US-centric perspective, it's felt like a very abstract, faraway problem. Which of course it doesn't feel like in a low-lying island nation, for instance, or if you're like me and have been exploring coral reefs for 20 years and they're basically gone in a matter of weeks. But it's been really interesting to see that shift between what we think is a true problem versus something that doesn't seem to apply to us. So I think through a lot of different technologies and campaign programs, and also just natural disasters, unfortunately, I think there's a big demand for solutions in these environmental issues. And I'm here in California, where we're getting tragic fires every year, and climate change is one of the most constant things we're talking about in terms of these extreme weather events, and what it means to have sustainable living, because people can't keep surviving in regions that are consistently burning down, literally.
I think, kind of jumping on that, Erica, this idea of groundswell, just reflecting on where we have come. Like, I'm probably older than all of you guys, but when I was a kid in art class, we would make cigarette ashtrays for our parents. And that was totally normal. And we'd have, you'd have parties that, parents had parties, and, everyone would smoke. And when the interstate highways were first being put in, you'd go out and you'd throw your stuff out the window. Those dips in the side, if it's for drainage, we thought they were for garbage, that was just and that is absolutely unacceptable now. So just knowing what is possible, things that are so ingrained, we can change them, and we can change them pretty quickly. So that is really a hopeful thing. And actually, designers know how to influence behavior change. And so that is a big role for designers to play.
And that just reminds me that a big part of design is also law and policy when it comes to things like the Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act and all how positive those impacts have been. And we often talk about environmental degradation, which is all true, but it's also nice to remember that we've solved a lot of problems, environmental problems, through good design and legislation and community involvement.
Yeah, I think it's important that, we realize our shortcomings, but then also our wins too. Like, I think that can be a really powerful tool in mobilizing others to be, channel their inner designer. So as we come to are close to our end, I'm curious if anybody has any questions. I didn't see any in the chat, but we'll just, give a couple of seconds to see if anybody wants to ask a question to our panelists at all. Going once, going twice. All right, I will then in turn hand it back over to Luna to kind of close us out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is quite insightful. I mean, I work for ECHOS full time, but I have my own project on the side for the past 5 years, and I am an official United Nations climate shaper. And it just, I advocate so much for conversations like this for that specific reason that I don't know exactly who mentioned before, but we need to somehow translate the issue because no one really ever explain to us what's going on or how to change this. So sometimes we need to literally draw the solution or draw what are the possibilities. So more we talk about it, if we don't have a massive way to change perspectives, maybe little by little, like Erica said before, little by little, we'll be able to make a big change. Here's an offer for those who are here today, because if it wasn't for everyone involved, the fire session wouldn't be happening. So this is a gift as a thank you for everyone who is joining us. This is my email address. If you have any questions about the program, if you have any questions about design leadership, the structure of the program, anything whatsoever that you want to discuss, if I can be a light in the tunnel for you guys, I'll be super happy to share my time with you. A couple of more things just to mention again, on the 9th of May, we start the program. It's divided in 2 moments every week. One, it's for the global master classes, which are always live. One for the local workshops. Again, from this perspective, Erica, from global to local, always trying to create context and seeing how we can proactively act upon issues. For this course specifically is for the industry of design and design leaders or creativity in general, but it can be much bigger than that. We know we're talking about design leadership and environment. And here it's just another gift. It's our first version of the design leadership ebook, but by the end of the week, we are launching the second one. So make sure to download the first one so you'll be updated with the second one when we launch it, and enjoy it. It's for free, and it was done with so much love in collaboration with designers from all over the world. So enjoy this gift. Thank you for your time. Mike, thank you so much for bringing always such insightful topics. I really do appreciate that. And I can't wait for Friday. Literally can't. And I'll see you then. Thank you, everyone. Please join us. I'm sure Mike and I will be posting online instructions for you to register for his next fire session coming up about design and communication. Go ahead.
No, I was just about to just give a plug to say, I think it's 4:30 p.m. Eastern time about design and communication. We've got 2 lovely panelists as well, so I think you'll enjoy that one.
Yes. I'll see you on Friday then. Thank you so much for everyone.
Thank
you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.